So let's do question 4. So for part A, what I am going to do is, I'm not going to really spend too much time on this because I know exactly what I need to know. I know that normal sine looks like that. And normal sine has a period of 2 pi. This is going to have a new period. And our period is going to be 2 pi divided by whatever that coefficient of x is. So our period is 2 pi over 3. Now, the important part is this. Through one full period, there are 4 steps, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. So I need to find each step size. So I'm going to take the period and I'm going to divide it by 4, which is the same as multiplying by 1/4. So that's going to give me pi over 6. So I'm still going to start at the origin, but then I'm going to have 1 pi over 6, 2 pi over 6, which reduces to pi over 3, 3 pi over 6, which reduces to pi over 2, 4 pi over 6, which reduces to 2 pi over 3. This is negative pi over 6. This is negative 2 pi over 6, negative 3 pi over 6, negative 4 pi over 6, 2 pi over 3. Okay, and I'm going to call this one and this negative one. And then again, I can start my little sign salutation, right? Hands up in the air, on your hips, touch your toes. So the trick is coming up with each step size and knowing that this is sine. For 4b, we are dealing with cosine. And for cosine, I know that cosine normally starts up. Cosine looks like that. But my period is what I'm going to handle first. So the period is 2 pi over 1/3, which is going to give me 6 pi. So I know that each step size is going to be 1/4, so 6 pi over 4, which reduces to 3 pi over 2. So I'm going to label each step by that. So we have 3 pi over 2. 2 of 3 pi over 2 is going to give me 3 pi. 3 of this is going to give me 9 pi over 2. 4 of this is going to give me 12 pi over, so 6 pi. And then the same thing going in the other direction. Negative 3 pi over 2, negative 3 pi, negative 9 pi over 2, and negative 6 pi. I'm going to call this one and this negative one, I'm just going to label it clearly. Cosine starts up, then down, way down, hands on hips, up in the air again. And I know cosine is even, so it's going to be exactly the same on the left and the right. For C, we have sine. We're going to find the period. My period is always going to be 2 pi divided by that coefficient, 1/4. So that's going to give me 8 pi. So my step is 2 pi, and that's how I'm going to label my axes. 2 pi, 4 pi, 6 pi, 8 pi, negative 2 pi, negative 4 pi, negative 6 pi, negative 8 pi. I'm going to go up to 1 and down to negative 1, and sine starts right in the middle, hands on hips. Then up, middle, touch your toes, middle. Touch your toes, hands in the air. Okay, so there's sine. For D, cosine. Cosine again starts up. I need to find the period. So our period for this is going to be 2 pi over pi. So our period is just 2. So I know that each step is going to be 2 over 4, or 1/2. And that's how I'm going to label 1/2, 1, 3/2, 2, negative 1/2, negative 1, negative 3/2, negative 2. We're going to go up to 1, down to negative 1, and cosine starts up. And again, go through your vinyasa. I hope you're getting it now. Oh my goodness, now for E, we're changing it up a little bit. Well, we have a change in amplitude, so I know we're going to go all the way up to 2 and down to negative 2. So I'm just going to label this a little bit differently. Okay, but the period is 2 pi over 4, which is pi over 2. So each step is going to be 1/4 of that. right? 1/4 of pi over 2 is pi over 8. So that's how I'm going to label my axes. Pi over 8, 2 pi over 8 is pi over 4, 3 pi over 8, and 4 pi over 8 is pi over 2 on both sides. And this is sine. So I start with hands on hips. So notice there are a handful of things that you need to be aware of. You need to be aware of what the period is going to be, because from that you're going to figure out what each step size is. So that's how you're going to label the x-axis. You need to be aware of what the amplitude is, because that's how you're going to label the output axis. And you have to be aware of, are you using sine or cosine, because that's going to make the difference. Whoops, and here we have a little challenge, because here we have a few things going on. So one thing I know is that it's cosine. Cosine normally starts up. We'll deal with that later. But I'm noticing that I'm going to take my cosine graph and I'm shifting it up 1 unit. So I'm putting in a sinusoidal axis here at y is equal to 1. I'm going to be oscillating about this. The other thing I know is that my period is going to be 2 pi over 2, which is just pi. So my step size is going to be pi over 4. So I'm going to have pi over 4, 2 pi over 4, 3 pi over 4, 4 pi over 4. Okay, good. And the other thing I know is that my amplitude is still 1, right? That's really a -1 there. But what's going to happen is, instead of starting above, this is going to be reflected over this. So I'm going to start at the bottom. So when I touch the toes, my toes here, I'm just going to be 1 unit below the sinusoidal axis. Then I'm going to be on it, hands on hips. So it's kind of like you're standing on a little stage here. You're the yoga teacher. So you're standing on a little stage, but you're still going through the motions. And question 5 will be on a new video.